When Prince William abruptly cancelled Queen Camilla's meticulously prepared state visit plans, the royal court froze. Was it a power play, a long-buried grudge, or a strategic royal pivot? In a move no one saw coming, William didn't just erase Camilla's agenda, he handed everything to Catherine. This wasn't merely a reassignment, it was a reshuffling of royal dominance. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For weeks, Camilla had poured herself into the details of this high-stakes international visit. Every element from diplomatic receptions to wardrobe symbolism had been carefully curated to reinforce her position as queen consort on the world stage. And then, without warning, it was gone. The message came from William's private office, not the king's, and it wasn't a suggestion, it was final. The cancellation, swift and surgical, bypassed the usual layers of approval. No explanation was offered. Camilla, blindsided and humiliated, was informed only minutes before the press release was circulated to foreign embassies. Inside the palace, the shock was instantaneous. Senior aides whispered of a deliberate power move, a message sent with precision and cold intent. The timing wasn't arbitrary. William's choice to cut Camilla out at the final moment wasn't just about optics, it was about control. And control within the monarchy is never seized without consequences. Rumours surged through the corridors of Kensington and Clarence House. The bond between William and Camilla had frayed beyond repair, and the Prince of Wales was no longer willing to hide it. Foreign diplomats, some already en route to greet the Queen consort, were caught off guard. Apologies from the Foreign Office poured in behind closed doors. But the real story wasn't international, it was personal. Catherine, quiet but ever composed, was summoned to a private briefing just hours before the announcement. The same tour, the same meetings, the same weight of royal responsibility now rested solely on her shoulders. She hadn't asked for it. But she accepted it with silent grace. That silence was strategic. Behind the poised demeanour was a message as loud as William's decision. The era of passive acceptance within the monarchy was over. Camilla had fought for her seat, but her authority was no longer unquestioned. William had redefined the chain of command with one signature. It wasn't just the end of a tour, it was the beginning of something far more seismic. A storm had been set in motion, and every royal figure, willing or not, was about to be caught in its path. But behind this sudden decision was a chilling realization: this wasn't just about a cancelled trip, it was about removing Camilla from the very core of royal diplomacy. Camilla had spent years building her place beside the king, but insiders now claim her influence was already fading. William's move exposed the fragility of her position and shattered the illusion of her unshakable status. What went wrong behind the velvet curtains? The answer begins with silence, ominous, growing, and unmistakable. In the months leading up to the cancellation, Camilla's public schedule had quietly thinned. Engagements once touted with pride were mysteriously pulled, appearances postponed without reason, and her name began to vanish from key court briefings. Those closest to the Queen consort initially dismissed the changes as temporary, but insiders now reveal it was anything but accidental. Her inner circle, once comprised of powerful aides and loyal allies, began to fragment. Senior courtiers retired early, long-trusted advisors were reassigned, and a chilling truth emerged: Camilla's grip on power was weakening, not from scandal but from strategic isolation. Behind closed doors, a new power block was forming. William's advisors, young, calculated, and fiercely loyal to the future king, clashed repeatedly with Camilla's traditionalist circle. Sources describe briefings marred by tension, communication breakdowns, and icy refusals to share classified diplomatic material. The once fluid cooperation between Queen and Prince fractured into two opposing forces. And King Charles? He remained a ghost in the background, absent, detached, unwilling to confront the growing divide between his wife and his heir. His refusal to intervene wasn't neutrality, it was surrender, and Camilla felt it. When the state visit was cancelled, it wasn't the public embarrassment that broke her, it was the silence that followed. No warning, no defense, no explanation from the man she stood beside for decades. As the palace pivoted toward Catherine, Camilla found herself staring into a vacuum of relevance. The phones stopped ringing, the press team went dark, and one source close to her revealed that upon reading the official cancellation memo, Camilla collapsed in tears, reportedly repeating the words, "He didn't even tell me himself." Meanwhile, Catherine's rise was not loud but deliberate. Her diplomacy, long dismissed as ceremonial, had quietly earned her global favor. Ambassadors praised her composure. World leaders requested private audiences. Foreign offices began to shift their attention away from the Queen Consort and toward the Princess of Wales. And within royal ranks, this wasn't viewed as accidental, it was inevitable. Where Camilla clung to power through title, Catherine won influence through presence. One ruled by appointment, the other led by acceptance. As Camilla's influence slipped like sand through her fingers, another royal was preparing to rise silently, strategically, and without hesitation. She didn't ask for it. She didn't campaign for it. But when duty called, Catherine didn't flinch. Stepping into Camilla's role overnight, she embodied the very image of regal authority, and the world noticed. This was no coincidence. This was Catherine's moment. In just under 24 hours, what began as a constitutional crisis was transformed into a display of masterful royal diplomacy. Catherine, without fanfare or resistance, assumed full control of the state visit itinerary that had once belonged to Camilla. But this wasn't a mere substitution. She reshaped it, tightened the focus, and shifted the tone from ceremonial pomp to strategic engagement. Meetings with foreign dignitaries were recalibrated to emphasize unity and renewal. Her soft-spoken manner belied the iron grip with which she handled the avalanche of responsibility suddenly placed at her feet. Inside the palace, even the most seasoned staffers were stunned by how quickly she brought calm to chaos. Beyond palace walls, the reaction was even more telling. Commonwealth leaders, some of whom had grown distant under Camilla's tenure, praised Catherine's presence as refreshingly authentic. Her ability to bridge tradition and modern relevance was not lost on foreign offices already recalibrating their alliances within the royal circle. Where Camilla had leaned on authority, Catherine wielded respect. The quiet confidence she displayed behind closed doors quickly became the subject of diplomatic gossip and admiration. Back home, the media followed suit. Headlines began to echo a striking sentiment: the people's diplomat. Editorials in major papers contrasted Catherine's dignity with the controversy that now clung to Camilla. Social media surged with clips of her precise yet humble delivery, her gracious handshakes, her measured words. Catherine wasn't campaigning for a role, she was becoming it. And for the first time, serious discussions emerged not just about succession, but about symbolism. The question no one dared ask publicly, "Is this the queen the people were waiting for?" began to whisper its way into elite circles. But the most telling sign came not from speeches or ceremonies, but from a singular gesture. Catherine extended an unexpected invitation to Princess Anne to co-host segments of the tour. In doing so, she signaled the formation of a quiet coalition, a bridge between the old guard and the future. The symbolism was profound. Anne, the monarchy's most seasoned warrior, was given prominence. And in that decision, Catherine proved she understood the art of power. You don't seize it, you share it wisely. Behind palace doors, this elegant takeover was seen as a masterstroke. It wasn't flashy, but it was undeniable. Catherine had not just stepped into Camilla's shoes, she had walked beyond them. She was no longer in waiting, she was in motion. The monarchy's future had a new face, and for Camilla, the echo of applause ringing in another woman's name was not just painful, it was threatening. But while Catherine moved forward with poise, whispers of betrayal began to echo louder in Camilla's inner circle, and one figure was about to go rogue. Camilla was never one to accept defeat quietly. As Catherine prepared to represent the crown abroad, Camilla launched a quiet rebellion from within. What began as subtle defiance soon erupted into a silent war between queen and princess. The palace had expected Camilla to step back with grace. Instead, she stepped sideways into the shadows where real damage could be done. Her first move came swiftly. Scheduled engagements were abruptly cancelled without explanation. Public appearances were pulled from the royal calendar, and media teams were instructed to stand down. To outsiders, it appeared as though Camilla was simply taking a break, but insiders knew better. This was protest in its purest form, a tactical retreat laced with venom. She wasn't stepping away. She was stepping out of line. Behind closed doors, fury erupted. Camilla summoned what remained of her loyal court. Senior aides, longtime confidantes, and trusted members of her communications team were called into an emergency meeting at Clarence House. According to a leaked transcript, her voice trembled not with sadness, but with rage. She accused the institution of betrayal, and when confronted with the news that Charles would not reverse William's decision, she turned her anger toward the king himself. "He let this happen," she reportedly said. He let her win. What had started as quiet resentment was becoming a storm that threatened the palace from the inside out. Then came the messages, damning and unfiltered. Sent from a private account and intended for her inner circle, Camilla's leaked words sent shockwaves through the royal establishment. She described the reassignment as an assassination of dignity and warned of irreversible fractures within the monarchy. The messages were never meant for public consumption, but once they surfaced, the damage was irreversible. One senior aide, caught in the crossfire, abruptly resigned. Though no official reason was given, many believed it was in silent protest of what they viewed as a palace in chaos, one that had abandoned its queen. Still, Camilla wasn't finished. In a desperate attempt to maintain her international relevance, she began circumventing traditional palace protocol. Rather than go through diplomatic channels, she reached out directly to foreign allies, royal households, ambassadors, and personal connections built over years. The message was subtle but unmistakable. She was still the queen, and she would not be erased. But those efforts didn't sit well with the palace machinery. Trust began to erode. Questions were raised. And yet, Camilla's camp doubled down. Perhaps most alarming were whispers from inside her private office that staff had been instructed to monitor Catherine closely. Reports surfaced that every detail of Catherine's itinerary, wardrobe, and remarks was being recorded and analysed. Officially, it was called brand consistency. Unofficially, it was seen as surveillance. Tensions grew thicker by the day. The crown was no longer unified. It was fractured, divided between two women, one with the title, the other with the throne in waiting. And in the quiet war unfolding behind palace gates, no one was sure who would emerge victorious. But even Camilla couldn't have predicted what would happen next, the return of an old royal document that would change everything. Buried in the royal archives was a confidential memo from Queen Elizabeth herself, never before revealed to the public. When unearthed by a senior archivist, its contents stunned the palace, a private recommendation on who should truly lead the monarchy's next diplomatic era. The document was never intended for the public eye, nor even for the wider royal household. It was a sealed memorandum, marked for internal succession guidance, handwritten by the late Queen in the final year of her reign. The date alone raised eyebrows just months before her death. And its contents? They sent a tremor through every royal office. Within the carefully worded letter, Queen Elizabeth expressed concerns, not accusations, but carefully drawn reflections on Camilla's capacity to navigate the complexities of global diplomacy in a modern world. She acknowledged Camilla's loyalty and her personal support for the king, but stopped short of endorsing her as the future face of international royal affairs. Instead, Elizabeth turned her gaze toward Catherine, describing her as an emblem of continuity and evolution. The Queen praised Catherine's deep understanding of contemporary values, her cultural sensitivity, and her quiet command of respect across international lines. She referred to her as the bridge between the tradition we must protect and the world we must engage. Those words underlined and under seal were now resurfacing at a time when the House of Windsor was fighting to redefine its very identity. When this memo found its way to Prince William, the timing could not have been more explosive. According to sources close to the matter, he read it in silence, then passed it to his most trusted advisors. It became his shield, his justification. He didn't cancel Camilla's visit on impulse. He enforced a vision outlined by the woman whose legacy still casts the longest shadow in royal history. For William, this wasn't a rebellion, it was restoration. Camilla, however, had never been informed of the document's existence, and when she was, it was not through the king, but through a back-channel leak, one likely orchestrated by palace insiders tired of the brewing feud. The moment she read Elizabeth's final thoughts, something shifted. Allies say she went pale. She did not speak for hours. What stung most wasn't the Queen's preference, but the fact that everyone else had known before her. For Camilla, it was not just rejection, it was betrayal from the grave. As for Charles, the revelation left him shattered. He had fought long and hard to legitimize Camilla's place by his side. Now, with his mother's ghost seemingly siding with William and Catherine, the king was torn between devotion to the woman he loved and the duty he inherited. Sources say he wept alone after reading the letter, clutching it as though it were a second farewell from his mother. He did not call Camilla. He did not summon Catherine. He simply disappeared from public view, leaving a vacuum that echoed with unanswered questions. And while the legacy of Elizabeth loomed large, another royal, once silent, stepped forward with her own verdict on the future of the crown. She had always been the monarch's quiet enforcer, loyal to duty above all. But now, Princess Anne broke her silence with a decision that would leave no doubt about where her loyalties lay. Her words were few, but their impact was seismic. Anne had spent her life operating in the background, never chasing headlines, never demanding credit. But when it came to safeguarding the monarchy's integrity, her actions spoke louder than any proclamation. In the wake of the turmoil between Camilla and Catherine, Anne was expected to play the neutral stabilizer. Instead, she delivered a blow no one anticipated. Without fanfare or announcement, she declined to appear at a high-profile engagement where Camilla was scheduled to co-host. Royal planners scrambled. Explanations were vague. But to those within the palace, the message was clear: Anne had drawn a line. What followed was even more telling. During a press briefing intended to focus on Commonwealth relations, a reporter asked Anne about the recent transition in state visit leadership. Anne could have dodged. She didn't. With unmistakable clarity, she praised Catherine's diplomatic grace, her steadiness under pressure, and her innate understanding of what the crown must become. It was an endorsement dressed in decorum, but it landed like a thunderclap across the monarchy's walls. In one sentence, Anne did what many feared: she publicly placed her faith in the Princess of Wales. Behind the scenes, whispers confirmed what had already taken root. Anne had requested a private meeting with William just days earlier. Those present describe it as brief but powerful. No minutes were taken. No aides allowed inside. But the outcome was immediate. Anne emerged with a hardened expression and a renewed schedule filled with joint initiatives tied to Catherine's rising role. It was a show of unity not with Camilla or Charles, but with the future. And Camilla knew it. In what some called a last-ditch attempt to salvage the bond, Camilla reportedly reached out to Anne through both private and official channels. Each message was met with silence, not out of pettiness but principle. Anne had always lived by one rule: the crown comes first, and in her eyes, the crown's future now rested with Catherine. Even Anne's own longtime aide, typically reserved and measured, made a rare comment to the press, calling the current moment the beginning of a quiet reckoning, and hinting at a silent vote of no confidence echoing through the senior ranks. But it wasn't just royal insiders taking notice. The British military, whose respect for Anne had been unshakable for decades, began adjusting its posture. Invitations shifted. Representation realigned. Protocols were reconsidered. Quietly but unmistakably, they too began favouring Catherine's emerging prominence over Camilla's official title. It wasn't rebellion, it was realignment. But as the senior royals aligned, the final blow would come not from protocol, but from public opinion, weaponized by Catherine's soaring popularity. It wasn't a coronation, but it felt like one. As Catherine toured in Camilla's place, crowds erupted in chants of future queen. A moment captured and broadcast across the globe. Suddenly, it wasn't just a family feud, it was a public mandate. The response was immediate and overwhelming. From the very first stop on her diplomatic itinerary, Catherine was met with thunderous applause and waves of royal flags, not out of obligation, but out of something far more powerful, genuine admiration. Viral clips from the tour flooded every major platform, showing crowds chanting her name, children reaching for her hand, and foreign leaders offering deference that once belonged to the Queen Consort. The world was not watching a placeholder, they were witnessing the rise of a monarch in everything but name. And the palace couldn't ignore what had become an undeniable shift. Online, the comparisons became inescapable. Side-by-side videos circulated comparing Catherine's confident yet humble engagements with Camilla's more formal and reserved appearances. Hashtags like #QueenCatherineNow and #RoyalReset began trending, not only in the UK but across the Commonwealth. Public opinion had taken on a life of its own. It wasn't manufactured by spin doctors or press releases, it was raw, emotional, and unfiltered. The people weren't asking for Catherine to ascend, they were demanding it. Polls confirmed what everyone already knew. An astonishing 83% of those surveyed expressed a clear preference for Catherine to become Queen Consort over Camilla. The generational divide was stark. Younger audiences viewed her as a symbol of modern grace, while older citizens saw in her a return to the dignity and warmth once associated with Diana. This was not a PR victory. It was a cultural reckoning. Catherine had become more than a royal, she had become a symbol of redemption, resilience, and rightful place. The international response was equally seismic. Diplomats and heads of state openly expressed admiration for William's refreshing decision to elevate Catherine's diplomatic role. Her meetings were extended, private dialogues were requested, and partnerships were proposed. The Crown's global relevance, once teetering under outdated traditions, had found new footing through her. And as that influence grew, so too did the silence from Camilla's camp. Her office issued no statements. Her social calendar vanished. Her presence at official events dwindled to nothing. It was as though the palace itself had pressed mute. Inside Buckingham Palace, quiet panic began to set in. Courtiers, once firm in their hierarchies, began to re-evaluate their allegiances. Protocol documents were discreetly pulled for review. Discussions were held behind closed doors. What if this shift wasn't temporary? What if Catherine's popularity had reshaped the line of symbolic succession before Charles could say a word? The institution, for all its tradition, has always known how to read the will of the people. And now that will was thunderous. But even amid public adoration, a storm was gathering, one final confrontation that would push Charles to the brink. In a closed-door crisis meeting, King Charles faced a devastating truth. He could no longer protect both Camilla's pride and the monarchy's future. What followed was a moment of reckoning, an ultimatum that would reshape the royal power map forever. The tension in the room was suffocating. For weeks, the palace had tried to contain the crisis behind a fade of unity, but now, the three central figures, Charles, William, and Camilla, stood face to face with the crown's most dangerous question: who truly speaks for the monarchy in the modern world? Charles, aged by stress and visibly torn, opened the meeting with a plea for harmony. He acknowledged the fractures, the missteps, the Cold War that had taken root in the House of Windsor. But his appeal for calm was met with silence so loud It rang like judgment. The silence wasn't apathy. It was battle-worn exhaustion and quiet readiness for what had to come next. William was the first to speak. Not with emotion, but with resolve. According to sources close to the meeting, he laid down a stark truth: support Catherine, or risk the throne's collapse. His words weren't a threat, they were a diagnosis. The public had chosen. The institution had begun to shift. And William, now fully aware of the role he had to play, made it clear that any hesitation would only invite deeper chaos. The time for compromise had ended. It was a line in the sand. Camilla, ever defiant, stood her ground. She didn't beg. She didn't plead. She stared down her accusers and made her position clear. I have paid too high a price to be erased. Her voice cracked with years of buried resentment of public scorn, private sacrifices, and a marriage fought for in the face of relentless criticism. But what she didn't say spoke even louder. She refused to acknowledge that her presence had become a liability to the institution she once sought to legitimize. This wasn't just about titles anymore. It was about identity and surrender. Charles broke. Witnesses say his face collapsed into his hands. This was not the monarch weighing policy. This was a father, a husband, and a son battling legacies too heavy to carry together. Torn between a wife who had stood beside him through disgrace and redemption, and a son whose popularity was now the monarchy's lifeline, Charles made the only choice he could. For the crown, for survival, he chose William. He chose Catherine. And in that moment, he severed something he would never fully recover. Camilla rose without a word. Her tears, though rare, betrayed the wound she had tried so hard to conceal. She left the room, not speaking to Charles for days afterward. Her silence, this time, was not protest. It was grief. What had been fought for, protected, and claimed as hers, had been taken by the very family she thought she'd finally won over. The Queen Consort had become a casualty of the future, yet as the royal chessboard settled, one final twist awaited, one that would leave even William questioning the cost of victory. Victory may have been claimed, but peace was not. As Catherine quietly took her place at the heart of royal diplomacy, and Camilla retreated into the shadows, one question lingered in every corridor of the monarchy. Had William saved the crown or started a war within it? Though the headlines had shifted, the tension had not. Catherine's graceful rise came at a price, one now being counted in silence, side glances, and fragile alliances. With every new engagement she accepted, every official handshake and televised speech, the weight of the crown's expectations pressed heavier on her shoulders. Supporters called her the beacon of a modern monarchy. But behind palace walls, some warned that too much light can cast long shadows. The attention was relentless. Every outfit, every word, every glance was dissected, not only by the media but by those within the institution still reeling from the speed of her ascent. Charles, meanwhile, had grown distant. He remained king in title, but not in presence. Once so vocal in defending Camilla's role, he now barely appeared beside her in public or private. Rumours swirled of long days in isolation, missed briefings, and quiet walks through royal estates once filled with purpose. The man who had been forced to choose between wife and legacy now stood suspended between regret and responsibility. And Camilla, for her part, had vanished. Out of sight, but not out of mind. Her remaining allies, discreet, strategic, and wounded, began to whisper of quiet revenge. Not through confrontation, but through resistance. They wouldn't forget what had been taken. William, hailed by the press as a decisive reformer, had little time to celebrate. Behind closed doors, doubt crept in. Had he gone too far? Too fast? He had secured a win, but at what cost? He had fractured loyalties, disrupted years of uneasy balance, and ignited tensions that no royal decree could fully extinguish. Even those closest to him began treading more carefully, aware that one misstep could send the entire institution spiraling again. The triumph felt hollow. The throne, steadied for now, still trembled beneath the surface. Catherine, though composed, knew the storm had only shifted direction. Her popularity, once a shield, was now a spotlight, and in that light old jealousies stirred. Her every success became a trigger, her every smile a statement. Allies watched with admiration, but skeptics watched with sharpened tongues. The crown had a new face, but the battle for its future had merely changed form. From public outcry to private tension, from headlines to hushed corridors, conflict had not ended. It had evolved. The monarchy had survived the storm, but the cracks had widened. Unity, once feigned with tradition, now demanded reinvention. And so, with duty fulfilled and alliances redrawn, the palace waits quiet, watchful for the next royal tremor to shake the crown once more. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.